Hey, welcome to 12 Tone. Hip-hop is arguably the most important musical invention of the last 50 years. It pushes musical boundaries, challenging the idea of what popular music is allowed to sound like, and its influence has been felt in pretty much every genre. But despite its success, or perhaps in part because of it, hip-hop has also faced a lot of criticism, much of which targets its signature vocal technique, rapping. One of the most common complaints about rap is that it's too simple. I mean, they're just talking, right? How can that be art? And if it is art, surely it's poetry, not music, right? Right? Well, I've argued in the past that this isn't true. Rap is a complex, nuanced technique on par with any other approach to vocal performance, but I think it's time I put my money where my mouth is. If hip-hop is a serious art form, which it definitely is, then it deserves serious analysis, so let's do that. Let's talk about what it really means to rap. First, I want to take a look at where this misconception comes from, and a good way to do that is through one of its most annoying manifestations. You've probably seen one of these mean-spirited videos with a musician, usually a classically trained one, performing an instrumental cover of a hip-hop song, where they just play a single note over and over, which is funny, I guess? Somehow. And if you're familiar with classical music, you can sort of see how this might happen, because in a lot of classical pieces, the lyrics don't really matter. Take Ave Maria. The version you're probably familiar with is by Franz Schubert, originally published as Ellenstritter Gesang, but Schubert didn't write the words. Ave Maria is a traditional Christian prayer to the Virgin Mary. Schubert just set it to a melody. Or actually, he didn't. Ellenstritter Gesang was a setting of a Walter Scott poem that begins with a part of the prayer, but modern performances tend to replace the rest of the lyrics with the full Ave Maria anyway, because, again, who cares? Besides, even if Schubert didn't intend to set the full Ave Maria, dozens of other composers did, including Mozart, Bruckner, Stravinsky, and Brahms. Each of these has a different melody, different harmonies, rhythms, arrangements, and more. They're completely different pieces of music that just happen to have the same set of lyrics grafted on. And a similar thing happens in jazz, where songs are often written as instrumentals, and then when a singer wants to do a version of it, they have to write their own lyrics. My favorite example of this is So What, the first track off Miles Davis's groundbreaking album, Kind of Blue. This was released in 1959, and almost a decade later, jazz singer Eddie Jefferson recorded a version where he'd added lyrics about the impressive work ethic of Miles Davis. Clearly, though, Davis's version proves that the song doesn't need words. Jefferson's just adding them in for decoration. And that's the thing, in most styles, the lyrics are effectively separate from the music. They exist on top of it, and while removing the words may change the song's meaning, it probably won't change its structure. But hip-hop doesn't work like that. More than pretty much any other genre of Western music, in hip-hop, the words become an intrinsic part of not just the message, but the music itself, an idea that's encapsulated in the hip-hop concept of flow. Now, flow covers a lot of different aspects of a rapper's performance. Dr. Kyle Adams breaks these up into two main categories: articulation, which is how you say the words, and meter, which is when you say them. The articulation aspects are really important in describing an individual rapper's delivery, but they're not that different from the tools you'd use to analyze, say, a rock singer. Rappers may play around more with things like legato and staccato, leaning on either long, flowing phrases or sharp, short attacks, but ultimately what sets flow apart as its own unique form of vocal delivery is how it uses lyrics not just for their meanings, but also for their sounds. Of course, almost all vocal music does this to an extent. Pick any popular song with lyrics and odds are you'll find that they rhyme, but for the most part, the rhymes in pop, rock, and jazz lyrics don't get much more advanced than couplets, where you have a pair of lines and the last syllable of each rhymes with the other one. Really adventurous songwriters may go as far as quatrains, where 4 lines fit together in an alternating rhyme scheme, but even then, these lyrics rely almost exclusively on end rhymes, that is, rhymes between the ends of phrases. Early hip-hop mostly followed the same pattern, but that all changed in the late 80s and early 90s when rappers began to experiment more with internal rhyme, where rhymed syllables appear within lines rather than just at the ends. For a great example of what you can do with internal rhyme, Dr. Adams cites the first verse of Blazing Arrow by Black Alicious, and this is where doing this as a YouTube video instead of an academic paper gets complicated. I'd love to just play you the verse, but in order to see what he's doing, you should really hear the whole thing. The problem is, it's 40 seconds long, and if I play you 40 uninterrupted seconds of a song, there's no chance I'll beat the inevitable copyright claim, so I'm gonna describe what happens as best I can, but if you want to pause the video, go to another tab, look up the song, and then come back, I won't mind. Just don't close this window, YouTube gets weird about that. Got it? Everyone good? Alright, let's go. So the verse is 12 bars long, and it starts and ends with traditional couplets. At the beginning, the rapper, Gift of Gab, rhymes Blazing Arrow with Rio de Janeiro, and then at the end, he rhymes it with Camaro. These two couplets serve to bookend a much more complex section in the middle, where Gift of Gab says something on almost every 16th note for 8 full bars, and on the rare occasions where he does stop to catch his breath, the DJ, Chief Excel, fills in for him. Rhythmically, it's perfectly even, and that's accentuated by the beat as well. The snare's on 2 and 4, the bass is on 1 and 3, and the guitar is strumming 8th notes. There's a little syncopation in the kick drum pattern and they swing the 16th notes, but all of that is entirely consistent throughout the section. On paper, from an instrumental perspective, this verse has almost no rhythmic interest at all, and yet all you have to do to prove that analysis wrong is listen to it. So where's that rhythm coming from? Well, it's coming from the lyrics. This whole section is built around a single lyrical idea, a 3-syllable phrase where the first and third syllables both contain the vowel sound A, like save the day, razor blades, change the game, or came to play. This is the rhythmic unit of the verse, and all the rhythmic interest comes from the different ways Gift of Gab places it around the bar. For the most part, each bar contains 3 instances of this phonetic unit. To start with, these begin on the downbeat, the second upbeat, and beat 4. If we drop the rest of the lyrics and just look at these phrases, we get something like this. And if we focus in on just the beginnings of the phrases, we see they form a well-known pattern called a tresillo, which is where you group sets of 8 beats into a pattern of 3-3-2-3-3-2. This tresillo sits on top of the rest of the band, creating a compelling contrast to the underlying 4-4 pulse. To reiterate though, no one is actually playing a tresillo. Gift of Gab, or occasionally Chief Excel, is rapping on every single 16th note. The pattern doesn't appear in a standard transcription, but listening to the song, it's pretty clearly there. You can feel it because the lyrics themselves have taken on structural significance. That's not a thing that most traditional forms of analysis are set up to catch, but it doesn't mean it doesn't exist, it just means we're not very good at finding it. And if that's not enough, partway through the verse he adds an extra 8th note to one of the gaps, pushing everything back a bit and switching over to this even cooler rhythm, where that same tresillo now starts on the first upbeat, creating even more syncopation between the lyrics and the underlying beat. Again, you can hear this happening in the song on the words okay okay, even though the rhythm of his vocal attacks doesn't change a bit. The simple fact that Gift of Gab can change your perception of the rhythm without actually changing anything that we would traditionally consider part of the rhythm shows that our conception of what counts as rhythmic is, at best, incomplete. But that's just one kind of flow. In Blazing Arrow, the rhyme scheme is incredibly tight and ordered, featuring one rhyme repeated over and over in a shifting rhythmic context, but another common approach is to weave multiple different internal rhymes together. Let's take a look at The People by Common. Again, I'm not going to play it, but if you want to pause and look it up, feel free. This time though, I just want to focus on the beginning of the first verse. After the refrain, Common starts with, "And the struggle of the brothers and the folks with lovers under dope experiment to discover hope." Here we see the introduction of 2 main rhymes. First, there's the straightforward single-syllable one with folks, dope, and hope. These are end rhymes. Their positions mark the ends of lines. They also draw attention to Common's uneven phrasing. The first and third lines are 3 beats each, whereas the middle one is only 2, an imbalance that wouldn't be nearly as noticeable if dope didn't rhyme. But there's also a 2-syllable rhyme here that we see in struggle, brothers, lovers, and discover. This one only shows up internally. The first 2 statements are on beats 1 and 2 of the first bar, strongly emphasized, which makes your ear latch onto them, but then he moves the other 2 onto offbeats, creating syncopation with the rhyme now that you know you're supposed to be looking for it. It adds another, more complex rhythmic layer on top of the already interesting pattern laid out by the first rhyme. Together, these 2 rhymes take you on a rhythmic tour all around the bar, emphasizing different parts of the beat and making the whole thing feel almost alive. Then in the next 2 bars, Common builds on those ideas with the line "Scuffle for notes, the rougher I wrote, times was harder, went from rocky starter to the voice of a martyr." Here we see those same 2 rhymes concentrated into the beginning. The phrases "scuffle for notes" and "rougher I wrote" both show them pretty much back to back with just one throwaway syllable in between. Interestingly though, note and wrote have been shifted onto offbeats too, de-emphasizing them, and at the end of the line we're introduced to our third rhyme, consisting of harder, starter, and martyr. What's fascinating to me here is that taken together, these 4 bars are effectively a pair of couplets. The first 2 lines rhyme folks with hope, and then the next 2 rhyme harder with martyr. On a surface level, that's all that's happening, but because he holds over the rhymes from the first half to form the internal structure of the next line, the boundary between the couplets becomes blurred, making it feel like one long sentence. The sounds of the words he's saying serve as a sort of connective tissue, defining the structure of the verse much more than any other instrument. And this can be taken even further. As an extreme example, Adam cites All Caps by Madvillain, where rapper MF Doom's incredibly relaxed flow drifts between numerous, often multisyllabic rhymes in ways that seem almost entirely unconnected to the underlying musical beat, creating a rich web of lyrical rhythms that practically dare you to try and pick them apart. Like in the line, "And he won't stop till he got the masses and show 'em what they know not through flows of hot molasses," there's the obvious rhyme between masses and molasses, but there's also 2 different internal rhymes, one between won't, show, know, and flow, and the other between stop, got, not, and hot. The closest analogy I can think of is like different drums in a drum solo. Sure, you might focus on one or another at any given moment, but the artistry comes in blending them together, building a series series of related sounds into one coherent structure. On the surface, this sort of flow almost does sound like just talking, but if you actually tried to do it, you'd see it really wasn't that simple. A lot of craft and skill goes into hiding the seams of such a complex pattern. The fact that MF Doom and others like him are able to make this stuff sound easy is a testament to their skill, not evidence of a lack of it. All caps also demonstrates another important part of many rappers' flow, enjambment. This is a poetry term for when the boundaries of your sentences don't line up with the boundaries of your meter. Like Will Smith's "Parents Just Don't Understand" begins with the lines, "You know parents are the same no matter time nor place. They don't understand that us kids are going to make some mistakes." Each of those lines takes 4 beats to deliver, and each one is a complete sentence. This means their syntactic structure, or the structure of their meaning, lines up with their metric structure, or the structure of the beat. This makes them feel like 2 complete independent units. On the other hand, when MF Doom delivers the line, "Sometimes he rhyme quick, sometimes he rhyme slow," or vice versa, that is again one complete sentence, but it takes him 5 beats to deliver it, pushing the line onto the next bar and breaking up that sense of coherence. The line before it ends with "Don't talk about my mom's yo," which means rhyme slow is technically an end rhyme within the 4-beat pattern of the song, but because the sentence carries on past it, it doesn't really register as an ending. The enjambment overrides our sense of meter, making even the end rhymes feel internal. And this is all just scratching the surface. I could spend all day grabbing random hip-hop songs and breaking down the rapper's flow, but the point here isn't about how any particular artist used the concept. There's as many kinds of flow as there are rappers. In fact, there's probably more. And I'm not trying to say that rappers with simple flows are bad either. Just like with any other device, simplicity is always a valid artistic decision. My point is that more than any other style of popular music, in rap, the words matter. They're not just decoration to be slapped on at the end, they serve a key structural role. It's no wonder then that removing them makes the music sound empty in much the same way a jazz song might sound empty if you just didn't play any of the chords. Some people argue that caring so much about the words means it's more like poetry than music, but that feels facetious to me. Every genre has its own focus. In jazz it's harmony, in common practice it's voice leading, in rock it's tone. Of course, all these things matter to some extent in every style, but so do lyrics. The way rappers use those lyrics is still intensely musical, and what's amazing is that this increased structural role doesn't come at the cost of meaning. Many rappers manage to deliver deep, powerful messages and compelling stories with the same words whose base phonetics they're converting into music. It's a phenomenal artistic achievement. I wanted to make this video for a couple reasons. First, I think it's a fascinating and often misunderstood topic, and I've wanted to cover it ever since I found Adams' paper. But also, right now, with everything going on in the United States and the rest of the world, I think it's an important time to acknowledge the contributions of Black artists to the world of music. That's not the only reason I support the Black Lives Matter movement, but it's worth recognizing that we owe Black musicians a huge cultural debt. And not just for hip-hop. Rock, jazz, country, and funk were all the product of Black musical innovation, and even in genres where the early pioneers weren't Black, more often than not, their influences were. The blues runs deep in metal. This can be uncomfortable for white audiences to face, and the mere mention of the fact that these genres come from Black communities is often seen as getting political, but it's not. It's a historical fact. And the pushback against hip-hop isn't new either. It's hard to imagine now, but despite being the darling of the modern academy, jazz faced a strikingly similar backlash in the beginning, with critics accusing the music of luring good white teenagers into a life of drug use and sexual proclivity. That's a real thing that actually happened. You can look it up. Noted racist Henry Ford even invested loads of money into promoting white country artists in order to push the new genre of Black music out of the mainstream. So here's the thing. When we talk about the reasons people don't like hip-hop, it's easy to chalk it up to just not understanding, to missing the nuances because they don't know what to listen for, and for a lot of people, I think that's true. But it's also worth acknowledging that there are powerful societal forces at play here designed to make sure you continue to not understand, and those forces are the same ones that have been around since Ford's time. The details have changed, but the system remains largely the same. That's not to say that if you don't like rap you're a racist, but maybe try asking yourself if you've ever really given it a shot. Have you tried to find hip-hop songs you like, or have you just heard a couple things on the radio and used that to judge the entire genre? If so, that's not your fault, but it is something you can fix. Hip-hop is almost 50 years old now, with dozens of subgenres based on every musical aesthetic imaginable, so even if it'll never be your favorite thing, odds are someone's made something that you'll enjoy. Honestly though, I'm tired of defending hip-hop. It doesn't need my defense. I want to celebrate hip-hop. I want to look at the things that make it great instead of deflecting bad faith critiques that assume it's inherently bad, so I'm gonna do that. I'm not shifting my entire channel focus, but I am gonna make a lot more videos on the music theory of hip-hop in the future. It's a field of study with a lot of unanswered questions, but the answers we do have are fascinating, and I want to help share them with the world. And while we're on the topic, last week I asked you to donate to the National Bail Fund Network if you had the means, and this week, while national attention towards the protest is fading, it's important to remember that the work goes on. People are still in jail for the crime of exercising their right to free speech in defense of Black lives, and they still need our support, so instead of putting a sponsor on this video, I'm just gonna link to the Bail Fund Network again. It's a great cause, and it's one of the most direct ways you can help support the fight to protect Black lives. Please consider donating if you have the means, and if you already did, please consider donating again. I've also linked to some more resources from Black Lives Matter if you'd like to educate yourself on other ways to support those efforts. And hey, thanks for watching, thanks to our Patreon patrons for making these videos possible, and extra special thanks to this video's featured patrons, Susan Jones and Jill Sundgaard. If you want to help out and help us pick the next song we analyze too, there's a link to our Patreon on screen now. You can also join our mailing list to find out about new episodes, like, share, comment, subscribe, and above all, keep on rockin'.